Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Newcastle City Council special meeting. My name is Mayor Linda Newing. It is 6 p.m. I'm calling this meeting to order. Today is November 7. Let the record show that all council members are present. This public meeting is being recorded and may be viewed later on the city's YouTube channel. Tonight's special meeting is a study session. The study session topic will be budget meeting number 4. Before we begin a brief presentation, questions and comments, and because of the way this meeting was noticed, council is permitted to make motions. But I would like to ask if there's anybody in the audience who would like to make public comment. We have nobody signed up. And if you do wish to do so, please state your name and the neighborhood in which you reside. You will have 3 minutes for your public comment. All right, seeing none, I'll close the public comment. City Manager Pingle, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. My name is Scott Ping. I live in the Creekside Oaks neighborhood. It says I only have 3 minutes, so I'm just kidding. Do you want to pull that up, Joe? The PDF. There you go. Thank you. Tonight, Council, I just wanted to briefly run through the budget memo that was in the packet and take any questions you might have. For kind of organization's sake, I just thought we would run through the changes that are included since the last budget study session, take any questions on those specific items, and then we would get into the couple of additional items that have come up since the last council meeting as far as items that council members wanted to discuss. And then we'll get into those more particularly after we hit this initial portion from the changes that staff had initiated. And so with general fund revenues first, we'll just hit the line items. So the preliminary budget included the best information we had at the time, but it was prior to when we receive property tax information from the King County Assessor's Office. And so the change made here is simply that since the preliminary budget was posted, we received that information from King County as far as what the 1% revenue increase would provide for us. And so we've added that to that line item. So the real and personal property tax line item increased from $6,255,000 to just under $6.3 million. After our last budget study session on October 17th, we were informed by the Department of Commerce that we had been awarded $40,000 for a missing middle housing grant. This is primarily to help us with implementing House Bill 1110 from the 2023 legislative session. And so adding that $40,000 to the budget. As we have worked through implementing interfund service charges, we've been working with State Auditor's Office on allowable components of that formula, and we had left IT out of that formula, and we learned that we could include it, and so that change is simply that we're including that IT component into the formula for interfund service charges. So that added about $58,000. Investment interest continues to come in strong. Everything we continue to hear from FOMC is that should remain for most of next year. And so even with changing the approach for how we're going to apply investment interest, we still think that that's a safe number, and so we increased the investment interest number for the general fund by $25,000. The next two items kind of go in tandem with each other. We had coded those wrong when those revenues came in, and so we made that adjustment, and so we simply made that adjustment for next year's revenues as well. So the change is really a net of $500, but that $10,000 increase and then a $9,500 decrease kind of go together, and that simply was we had coded it wrong and we made the correction. Well, scroll down to expenditures. Any questions on the revenue side? So all told, that adds the $168,000 in additional revenue to the general fund.
No questions? All right.
And then on the expenditure side, at the October 17th budget study session, there was a desire to have a facilitated retreat next year. And so that was the addition there, increasing the professional services line item in the city council budget from $2,000 to $7,500. Just with where we're at currently with our legal services costs, we feel comfortable bringing that down a little more and feel like we're in a safe place. So reduce that legal professional services line item in the city manager fund. The change in the IT fund, we talked about making the change with our financial software, saves about $3,000, and then other various adjustments brings that down even more, and so reducing that number by about $6,000. The planning professional services, that's essentially tied to the missing middle housing grant that's on the revenue side. So we do think that we'll be able to cover a chunk of that in-house, but that's simply a skill set that we'll need consulting help for as far as implementing House Bill 1110. And so it's not dollar for dollar because we can do some of that in-house, but that would be consulting services for that grant. And then the change in the transfer out is simply that with the additional revenue coming in on that side, we're able to reduce the amount coming out of the cumulative reserve fund to the street fund. We can help that out from the general fund and still have a net positive increase in fund balance for the general fund, but also decrease the amount coming out of the cumulative reserve fund to the street fund. And so with that change, rather than $565,000 coming out of the cumulative reserve for the street fund, only $290,000 will come out. $290,000 would come out of the cumulative reserve fund for the street fund. And so the total expenditure change is $289,500, but $275,000 of that is the change in the transfer, rather than that full amount coming from cumulative reserve, a chunk of that coming from the general fund for the street fund. And then the very bottom there is the net change to the general fund. So the preliminary budget showed a surplus of, or a change in fund balance of an increase of $127,000. And with all of those changes, the change in fund balance is an increase of $6,500. And so the negative 120 is just what the surplus came down by, but primarily because we're making that transfer out of the general fund.
Questions? Councilmember Clark?
Thank you. So we get $40,000 grant and we got to immediately give most of it away to some contractor. Is that kind of what I see here? Is that?
That is what you see here.
Okay. Thanks.
Want to scroll? Most of the rest of it is tied to what we've talked about above, other than the street fund. So with the street fund, with our contracted change is tied to the CPI, and it was higher than we had initially budgeted for, and with where revenues are coming in currently, we had that increase in what we'll see from the waste management administrative fee. Then the change on the expenditure side is simply the street funds portion of adding in the IT services cost to that formula. And then the rest of it is, again, tied to the interfund service charge changes So those are the increases to the capital funds in the swim fund. Questions on those?
Any questions? Okay, nothing.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So there was essentially two things that came to my attention after the budget study session on October 17th. The first one was a desire to have more discussion about potentially adding an officer. And then the other one was potentially looking at ways to reduce the $290,000 that would still come out of the community reserve for the street fund. And maybe to kick that off, I'll ask Chief Kajihiro if he wants to talk about why the desire for an additional officer, and the council can go from there.
Thank you, City Manager Pingle. Chief Kajihiro, welcome. Good evening.
Hi. Oh, we're not going to do that yet. No, not right now. Adding the extra officer for me, I think the importance is safety. Because just to point out, the other day we had the shooting. One of my officers was there by himself and took the person in custody by himself. That's one. Is safety, just having more people a partner on. Another aspect would be having two people would help on staffing. So if I have to, say somebody calls in sick, chances are I have another person on. I don't have to rely on King County, because sometimes we can't fill it with an overtime spot. So there are times where the city went vacant and we had unincorporated cover for us. Because we just couldn't get anybody. So that would be, I think, the most important aspects why we need more officers. If Corey wants to share on the deputy level, you want to share?
Hi there, Corey Martin. I'm Newcastle's new detective. Just to echo, realistically, I worked graveyard shift here in the city for quite a while. Being the only person in the city can be unnerving at times whenever there's calls for service. Sometimes it requires that we stand by for an additional unit to come, and that is not typically going to be Bellevue or Renton. It's going to be an unincorporated King County deputy. And you're talking about a response time of 20 minutes on average, could be longer if unincorporated King County is having staffing issues. So there is going to be an impact to the citizens of Newcastle in some way, shape, or form at some point. The additional officer would certainly alleviate that in most situations. So.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Detective. All right. Any questions, comments, any motions? Councilmember Lakota?
Question for Scott. The document, the question that I asked, and thank you for sending me the detailed document. In that I know last time we discussed this, 36,000 for the credit card fees. So I'm still, because it was Power at the time and he said that it's revenue, but over here it is showing as cost. And it says this primarily credit card fees for when customers pay with credit card, and it is tied to the revenue. So do we pay that fees, or do we get that back in the revenue?
Right. So when people pay with their credit card, and if Lindsay has more details, that's great. So we still have to pay the fees. It's still an expenditure, but then when a developer or whoever comes in and pays, they're charged a portion of that. And so it's both. So we have revenue coming in on the other side, but we also have to pay the fees from our end.
So then this 36,000, we recoup all of it?
I don't know if we recoup all of it, but we recoup a big chunk of it.
So what if we stop charging by credit card, just to be on the safe side, because we might not be recouping all of it, and we just do it by cashier's check, or because I've seen like the state doesn't charge for I mean, the state doesn't take any credit cards. Can we do that?
We could do that. I don't know if we want to do that. Go ahead, Lindsay.
So I was going to say, right now we're charging a 4% fee, so it gets added at the time of payment. And we've been checking the last couple statements that come from the merchant service vendor, and we are recouping the full amount of the cost to conduct the transaction at this time.
Are we recouping 100% of what we
Yes.
are getting?
Yes, so what we're collecting with 4% is enough to cover the cost of the transaction.
So why do we have it over here then, like, because it washes off, right?
It does, but we are required by SAO to report both sides of the equation.
Okay. Okay, well, I was looking at this document and I still feel that, you know, we are taking 290,000 from the reserve. And my goal today is going to be try to reduce that as much as possible. And now that we need one more, you know, I mean, like we need to put more focus on public safety, so we need to save some funds for that. So I move to reduce travel and training cost by 50,000.
Second?
So I think,
Excuse me, we have a motion
Sorry,
on the
sorry.
floor.
Yeah.
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Lakotia, seconded by Councilmember Clark, to reduce travel and training by $50,000. Councilmember Lakotia, would you like to speak to your motion?
so given our priorities, I think the priority right now has to be, you know, services for the city, which is, you know, we need to put more funds into public safety and those things. So I think for this year, we can compromise a little bit on the travel and training for the internal staff because we are short of funds. And if we are able to find funds, you know, elsewhere and not touch the reserve, you know, we will bring the program back. But I'm not cutting it down by 100%. It's just by 50,000. So I know we have 64,000. So only the necessary can be done. But then I think it's important that we look into this.
Councilmember Clark, anything to add?
No, nothing to add.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to, I'm sorry, Councilmember Charbonneau.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. City Manager Pingle, can you further stratify the costs that are being discussed to give us a better picture of what is sort of encompassed by all that line item?
So this is what's being asked is to take it out of the total through all budgeted funds. We budget by fund, and so if we're going to reduce an item, we should reduce it by fund. I think we've taken an incredible amount of travel training dollars out of the budget as it is, and what is in the budget is what I would recommend.
Sorry, I thought I hit that button. All right, motion on the floor to reduce travel and training by $50,000. Motion made by Councilmember Lakotia, seconded by Councilmember Clark. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion fails 3-4 with Council members Lakotia, Griffin, and Clark voting in the affirmative. Okay. Deputy Mayor Sherlock.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to make a motion to add another police officer for 2024, and I would like it to be funded through the cumulative reserve funds.
Second. Okay, motion on the floor made by Deputy Mayor Sherlock, seconded by Mayor Newing, to add another officer and fund that officer by the cumulative reserve. Deputy Mayor Sherlock, would you like to speak to your motion, please?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to have a full discussion about this motion, but my reason for making it and supporting it is I've talked for almost 4 years now about having a goal of getting to a point where we can have 2 officers on duty 24/7 in Newcastle. This wouldn't get us there, but if we don't start adding, we're never going to get there. And I just, especially with what just happened and listening to the chief and detective tonight, it's the right thing to do. We have money right now to spend, and I just really feel like it's appropriate to move towards that goal of 2 officers on duty 24/7.
Thank you. I seconded the motion. Public safety, health, it's always been my number one. You can't put a price tag on a life. Granted, what happened here last week doesn't happen here every day. But I guarantee you, we don't want to live in a community where it dies. We have a small police department. They're amazing. They are there. They're in the community as the friendly officer. They're in the community as the working officer, the responding officer. This is a group of individuals that doesn't have depth. I remember a time not too long ago calling King County Council Member Reagan Dunn pleading that we need more officers. There was a huge shortage during the pandemic. We became a community that officers didn't want to work in because they didn't have that backup. It was 20, 25 minutes away. That's no fault of NPD. That's no fault of King County Sheriff's Office. That is the fault of the sign of the times, where law enforcement professionals are fewer and fewer to come by. This is the time to start beefing up our NPD. I fully support this motion, and I hope my fellow council members will do the same. Councilmember Clark.
Thank you, Mayor. I was going to ask a question before Councilmember Lakoti made her motion, so I would like to ask the chief a couple more questions before we have this vote, because like the deputy mayor said, it warrants a discussion. So I do have a couple of questions that I would like to ask.
I'll allow that.
Yes.
Thanks, chief. So we are budgeted for 11 officers, but King County doesn't have that person for us. So let's say that we pass this motion and we authorize a 12th officer. Will King County then look at Newcastle and say they're too short, so it's more urgent to get them a person? Or is the same level of urgency going to be resulting from, no matter what our total is, if we said 20 or 10, or, you know what I'm saying? Is they're going to look at us and say, oh my gosh, it's more urgent now?
I can't guarantee that, but it'll be a little bit more urgent because we now 2 vacant instead of 1. So they will potentially fill at least the 11th officer, and I think there's 8-9 month holding period, right? And for the 12th officer. And the longer we wait, it's just gonna push things back that much longer.
What does that mean, holding period for?
So it's a 8 to 9 month, it's almost like a training period that we have to wait to get the 12th officer,
Okay.
what the additional officer.
We haven't really, well, the reserve officer program, okay? So it's
Yes.
in the budget, we tried to get it in previously. How quickly, or do you have an idea of what?
That
getting people on the street?
that's a recruiting component, so it's not a guarantee. And how we budgeted on somebody that would be a retired officer. That somebody retired and want to come here. So that's not a guarantee.
Do you have any leads in,
So-
on that at all?
I had a lead, and I'm exploring it, but it's not a done deal and it's not 100% yet. So that's, we can't rely on that because those officers work, it's a volunteer hours, I think it's 16 hours a month. And I can't really dictate when they come in because it's volunteer. So I can't say, you know what, we have to rely on the reserve officer to fill a vacancy. I can't rely on that. We need a full-time officer to do that.
Thank you.
Councilmember Griffin.
Thank you. Haven't we been paying for 1 officer that we have been getting? Now, does this mean we'll pay for 2 and still not get an extra officer or 2?
I'm gonna defer that to the city manager. He'll answer that a little better than me.
Yeah, so we do pay for all 11 officers, and then as a part of a reconciliation at the end of the year, anything that they don't fill, we get reimbursed for. So we're in that mode where this year, next year, we'll get a full officer reimbursement. When adding an officer, we'll pay for 9 months that we'll never get back, no matter when we add it. And so whether they had plenty of officers and they were ready to give us a 12th officer, we don't get them for 9 months no matter what, regardless of when we request it.
We pay for the 9 months, but we don't get anybody.
Right, so if we added, so if the council tonight voted to add an officer next year, we would make that request. That time starts essentially January. So we wouldn't get an officer at least until October at the earliest. If we went all of next year with no officer, we would only get reimbursed for the last 3 months of the year of that first year. But then moving forward, we would get reimbursed the full amount of whatever they don't fill. It's just no matter when we ask for it, we pay for the first 9 months no matter what.
This doesn't sound like a very good deal.
It's been the deal for 25 years.
Long time. Councilmember Charbonneau?
Thank you. Yeah, a couple questions. First for City Manager Pingle. So since we're budgeted for 11 and have been receiving 10, if we were to budget for a 12th, would it be possible that, because we've already eaten that first initial 9 months cost, would that be prorated for us? I mean, I guess it's not essentially, I guess it doesn't matter in the sense that like we still have to pay the 9 months for the 12th position.
Right.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, I answered my question. And then Police Chief Kajihiro, I just wanted to know, I know there was a lot of talk and we received presentations about trends for bringing more police officers on at the county level. Has recruitment been successful?
Right now, I believe there's about 93 from the point where they hire to the training issue, after the academy into training. There's about 90 plus, I would say. So right now they're trying to ramp up, recruitment. They've been knocking on my door for one of my officers for a temporary duty assignment to help with recruiting. So recruiting efforts are picking up a little bit. But it's one of those where we might have 93, but not all is going to make it to training. Any other questions?
Deputy Mayor Charlotte?
Thank you. So going to what Councilmember Griffin was asking about, the way I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, the 11th officer that we added in, I believe, 2021, we paid that 9 months because anytime you add an officer, you have to pay that 9 months before you get a body.
Yes.
And so that's why we've been reimbursed since then, since that 9 month period ended, in full ever since then for that 11th officer, because it hasn't been filled.
Yes.
And then with the 12th officer, anytime you add an officer, again, I know I'm reiterating this, but you have to pay that training time,
Yes.
no matter what.
Yes.
Now, the longer we wait, inflation, whatever, that cost is going to go up.
Yes.
Correct?
Yep.
So there's the 12th officer issue that we're kind of all focusing on right now. But to what Councilmember Clark was talking about, we can take the 11th at any time. We've already paid that training. So if King County Sheriff's Office recruits or decides that we're down enough, which I believe you told me what their new policy is 82% or higher. That would put us at about 83%. 10 out of 12 is about 83%. So we'd really be right on that edge. So there's, like you said, you can't guarantee, but there's a good chance that we could get that 11th officer anytime. As soon as we fund the 12th.
That's a high possibility, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Chief, I'm wondering if you can remind me the wait time to get an officer into the academy.
Ooh, geez.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to catch you off guard, and
Yeah,
I understand if
you know,
you
just-
can't answer
just to-
that.
I don't know the wait time, but just to hire an officer and all that, it's going like 3-4 months.
That's what I
Just,
thought.
From recruiting to get them into, like,
Academy.
into the academy.
Yeah.
So roughly. We're trying to speed it up, because, we want the candidates and we need people on the road. So
Yeah.
I know the King County Sheriff's Office are taking measures to speed that process up. So, but that's pretty much, what I can tell you right now. I can get you a
Thank
better
you.
answer, later. if you
No,
want.
no, and that's totally fine. If you want to share that with City Manager Pingle, he would be happy to email it out to the council, the response to that question. But, and I apologize for catching you off guard on the floor. Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
I just want to add, so and again, this is my understanding just from asking questions of King County administrative staff and stuff, but my understanding is the reason for the 9 months is simply that even if King County Sheriff's Office was fully staffed, we had our 11th officer and we said, hey, we want another one, they don't just have extra staff available to provide, they don't overstaff the sheriff's office. And so when us or any contracted city says we want another officer, they're hiring a new officer for us. And so then we have to pay for that. They make us pay for 9 months so that they can hire somebody, get them to the academy, get them field trained, and then give them to us. And so that's the reason why we have to pay for the 9 months, because they're gonna go hire an officer specifically for us and add to the King County Sheriff's Office numbers for the city of Newcastle, or for whoever was asking for that.
Okay, any other questions? Councilmember Griffin?
If that is true, why wouldn't we go ahead and get our officer if we pay for one? You say they hire an officer for us when we say we want an officer. But we don't get them for 9 months, and we may not get them at all because they just don't have a abundant supply of officers all the time.
That's right. So right now, King County Sheriff's Office is not fully staffed. They don't have the officers to fill all of the officer positions that they have. And so they don't have an officer to give us. They can still go out and recruit one, but that's what they're trying to do, to fill the positions that are already left unfilled. So what I'm saying is the reason for the 9 months is that if they were fully staffed, they would still have to go recruit a new officer for us if we requested an additional one. Right now is different because they're not fully staffed.
Right. Interesting.
Okay.
And then, if there's more discussion, great. I just wanted to, before you get to a vote, the motion was that to add an officer and use Coon Reserve to pay for it. I just wanted to make sure the number was in front of the council. So the number that we have from King County for the cost of an officer is $254,667. I just wanted to make sure that was clear, because that's how we would adjust the budget for adoption should the council decide to do that. So
Thank you. Thank you for adding that. Appreciate it. Oh, Councilmember Villasenor.
Yeah. So just one clarification. So the actual commitment for next year would be 3/4 of that, right? So 185, 190,000, like off the top, like napkin math.
right.
Right. That we
Only if we didn't get an officer in October.
right.
If we got an officer in October, we're still paying for the whole amount. Even if we don't get an officer all next year and get reimbursed, we don't get reimbursed until 2025.
Okay.
And so the reimbursement would be a 2025 budget issue, not a 2024 budget issue. So what's in the 2024 budget, since we're not gonna, we don't imagine we're gonna get an officer before the end of the year for our 11th officer that's still vacant, we've budgeted for a full officer reimbursement for 2024 because we didn't get him this year. And so for next year, it would be whatever we don't get next year, we get reimbursed in '25.
Right. So if the assumption is there are two assumptions, right? There's one, we don't get an officer next year, so we will get a reimbursement in 2025 for 3/4 of the cost of that officer if we approve that tonight. So
We would pay for 3/4 and only get
Yeah.
reimbursed for a fourth.
Right.
Yeah.
And then if anyone, and if any position was staffed, we would just pay for, like, someone got staffed in June, we'd pay for half a year.
Right, that's right.
For the officer as well as the training, in addition to the training.
So we pay the training no matter what. So if we got an 11th officer in June, and that was all we got for the rest of the year, we would get reimbursed for 6 months of Officer 11, and 3 months of Officer 12.
Got it, thank you.
Councilmember Lakotia.
So basically, we lose this 9 months of whatever the amount that we're paying,
Yeah, no matter what.
irrespective whether 24,
No matter
25.
when we request it, we pay for 9 months.
Okay. All right. Motion on the floor to add another 1.0 FTE officer and cover the cost of that officer through the cumulative reserve. Motion was made by Deputy Mayor Sherlock, seconded by Mayor Newing. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No,
Motion carries 6-1 with Councilmember Griffin dissenting. All right. Anything else? Any other motions out there on the budget? Any questions, Councilmember Clark?
Thank you, Mayor. I make a motion to limit staff compensation to 3%.
Second.
Can you clarify compensation?
Correct, thank you. Total, currently, there's a merit and a cost of living. I motion to reduce that total to 3%, period, 3%.
Okay, they're two separate items.
I understand that, but 3%, that's it, 3%.
Okay, motion on the floor made by Councilmember Clark, seconded by Councilmember Lakotia to limit the total of the merit and COLA to 3% in 2024. Councilmember Clark, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I would like, I understand, we have a valuable staff, I get that, but the public in general, nobody gets 7% ever. I've never heard of it. So I mentioned this last year, and I know where this is going to go, but I mentioned this last year, that the general public expects us to adequately and properly spend their money. So I cannot face my neighbors who are struggling and maybe don't have any raise or not even a job and saying, sorry, we need your tax money so we can give the staff 7%. And they're going to say, well, why? And I'm going to have to say, well, because Lakemont does it, or, Lake Forest Park does it. I mean, that's what I'm going to hear back is why we do that, is because other cities do it, but that's a silly reason. So this is not to denigrate the staff. This is to bring our city government in line with the general public and general industry and the whole rest of the world. I get the argument that all the cities do it, but I don't buy it, right? Why do we have to do what all the cities do? We should do what's best for our citizens. And I'm not going to tell my neighbors that I'm raising your taxes or I'm going to take your money when you're not getting anything, so I can give the staff 7%. That's a significant amount of money change. So I think that is adequate, it's proper for us to do that, especially in this hard times for our public.
Councilmember Lakotia, anything to add?
No, thank you.
Okay, motion on the floor. Deputy Mayor Sherlock.
Thank you, Mayor Newing. I'm not going to support this motion for a few reasons. First of all, it's in our policies to, when inflation is over a certain amount, then the COLA is 4%. It's maxed out. That's the policy. So we'd be voting against our policy to vote for this. Secondly, it's not a 7% raise. There's a COLA, which is a cost of living, and then there's the merit. Well, the merit is not given. It's not a guarantee. There is a review process, and only certain employees are even eligible for it, because if someone hasn't been here for a long time, they might not be eligible for it. And that's all I can say right now, but mostly it's going against our policies, and I'm gonna vote no to this.
Anyone else before I go second round? Okay, Councilmember Clark?
Thank you. I understand what the deputy mayor says, but what if our policy had something really crazy, like we were all supposed to run around in circles and kick each other in the butt? I mean, would we do that just because it's in our policy? We have the ability, we are the council, we determine the policies. So we can make changes to those things when it's necessary. That's what I'm saying, so.
Deputy Mayor Sherlock?
Yes, we can make those policy changes. We're not making a policy change right now. You're making a motion that goes against our policies. And the other point I was gonna make that I forgot was, actually, people have gotten over 7% raises recently. People who are on Social Security recently got over a 7% raise. So it isn't, first of all, it's not a 7% raise, period. But there are plenty of people who get more than 7% raises.
Councilmember Charbonneau?
Thank you. Yeah, just real briefly, I think we can't operate in a silo when we do this work. We have to compete against other cities to hire employees. I think investing in our people is critical because they're the ones who interact and are much more likely to interact with citizens day to day than we will. Less than, it's somewhere between 11.5 to 12% of the tax burden you feel is from the city itself. A lot of it comes from other outside sources. So I recognize it might look like this is not us being lean, but that's not the case. There's outside factors that affect this. Investing in our people is probably the best investment we can make. So that's why I'll be voting against this.
Okay, motion on the floor to limit staff COLA and merit to a total of 3%. Made by Councilmember Clark, seconded by Councilmember Lacotia. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Motion fails 3-4 with Council members Clark, Lacotia, and Griffin voting in the affirmative. Anything else, Councilmember Lacotia?
So, I'm looking at the consultants total, and we are spending like $1 million in, overall consultants over all the funds. So, just want to make a small change. I mean, again, we are running $290K deficit. I move to reduce consultants total by 30,000.
Second.
I need a clarification on that motion, please. Consult the total? Okay, motion on the floor made by Councilmember Lacotia, seconded by Councilmember Clark to reduce consultant fees by 30,000. Councilmember Lacotia, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah, just to clarify that we are spending $1 million, we have budgeted for $1,020,520 for consultants, and all I'm asking is to reduce it by 30,000. I'm sure we can find that money somewhere. And again, this is to bring down the 290K that, that's what I'm just trying to do. Again, we have other services that are going to take precedence, so it's important that we look at some expenses here.
Councilmember Clark?
Nothing to add.
Any questions, comments? Oh, go ahead, Deputy Mayor Sherlock.
I'm just wondering what do you mean by consultants, or City Manager Pingle, do you understand what exactly is being asked here? Because I feel like there's a lot of contracts that are being called consultants, and I just would love to hear your take on how that all works.
So yeah, primarily, mostly professional services costs. The $1 million sounds like a lot, but over half of it is tied to revenue. We got rid of 5 FTEs from 23 to the 24 budget. Part of that is because we're using consultants. Consultants cost less than a full-time staff person.
And Councilmember Charbonneau.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. So I think my perspective on this is I was meeting with finance director Chambers not too long ago, and she talked with me about the practice of overestimating expenditures and underestimating revenues as a way to be safe within budgeting. The reason I would lean towards not supporting this is because every single consultant that we use is going to appear on an agenda. Every single contract is going to appear on a consent agenda for us, appear on a regular agenda. We can pull off and vote on any of those individually at any time. I think one of the things of running a really lean staff, which we do relative to other cities our size, is consultants allow them the flexibility if different things come up, and we can't always, anticipate what might come up, to go and pursue the outside expertise that might be needed. I'm happy to have a conversation with any individual consultant with any individual contract, but I'm just not a fan of I don't think this policy is nuanced to just reduce it by a certain amount rather than have those individual conversations as they come and look at those specific cases, right? Because we can do that, and I hope we underspend this, and I hope we underspend it by more than 30,000, and we very easily could, but it seems more arbitrary, in my opinion, to do that now as opposed to having those conversations as they come, because we can't anticipate what the consultants and contracts we might need might be, so.
I want to remind folks, we're a contract city. That means we've got expert personnel. We really do. We're very fortunate. But they don't have the time to do all of this. One of our biggest consultant contracts is the plan review. It's all passed through for the most part. I think there's a couple little things that we end up covering the cost on, the plan review. But we don't have a lot of staff. If I recall, in May, when this council chose to reduce staff, I was the one vote that voted against it. I'm proud of that, by the way. Consultants are situational. I totally agree with Councilmember Charbonneau, so thank you for that. The other part of this is, what if we have some kind of a major collapse of, stormwater infrastructure or a road? I've seen that happen, you guys. I've lived that dream. It can happen here because our infrastructure is old. We have great maintenance on it. Thank you, Director Bronze and your team. But it's not guaranteed. It's not going to fail tomorrow. And you know what? You need to hire a consultant to do the design work. So consider that. Anything else? All right. With that, we'll go for a vote. The motion on the floor, made by Councilmember Lacotia, seconded by Councilmember Clark, is to reduce consultant fees by $30,000. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed? No. Motion fails 3-4 with Councilmembers Clark, Lacotia, and Griffin voting in the affirmative. All right, moving on, we're about 12 minutes to our regular session. Anything else? Councilmember Lacotia.
Okay, I'll try again. Many times we put things in the budget and sometimes, we want to spend that because it's like use it or lose it kind of situation. But anyways, I did more research and I found a free resource to do this task. And I think we can save some money here. I know we can always decide it later, but I'd rather decide now. So I moved to remove the retreat facilitator cost of $5,500.
Second.
Motion on the floor made by Councilmember Lacotia, seconded by Councilmember Clark, to reduce the retreat facilitator by $5,500. Councilmember Lacotia, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, as I said, that I found a free resource, very experienced, who has done this work professionally, and we should leverage that. Again, my goal is here to reduce the $290,000 that we are pulling from the reserve. And we just did a retreat last year, so it's not necessarily that we're going to do a retreat again next year. I mean, I know it's going to be a new council, but then the new council is going to be there for 4 years. So I think doing it in 2 years, it's a possibility that we might not have to do it. But even if we do it, I found a free resource who would be available whenever we need it. So, and that's the reason I want to reduce this cost.
Councilmember Clark, anything to add?
Just that we could easily do it in this chamber, you know, and save the money and the time to go down to someplace else to do it. So,
Councilmember Charbonneau, briefly, please.
Thank you, sorry. No, I appreciate my colleagues' efforts to sort of reduce that cost. I guess my thing is I would love to have, for the staff and other city council members to be able to review the resource before just, you know, just understanding that it might exist out there somewhere. So I think if we budget it out for what it currently is and then ask you all to bring that forward so we can collaborate on it, and then if folks consent to it, we can move forward with that. That would be, I'd be much more comfortable with that.
Comment, question? I have a comment very briefly. $5,500 isn't a whole lot of money, folks. You have a brand-new council next year. This girl's not going to be here. And I found the facilitator very valuable we had in February. I hope that, you know, we've already talked about this. We voted on it already. So I thought, didn't we last meeting? No, we didn't vote. Okay. But come on. All right, motion on the floor made by Councilmember Lakota, seconded by Councilmember Clark, to reduce the retreat facilitator by $5,500. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. No. Motion fails 3-4. Councilmembers Clark, Lakota, and Griffin voting in the affirmative. Anything else? Okay, seeing nothing else. City Manager Pingle, do you have anything in closing? Thank you. I will adjourn the study session and give you back 9 minutes of your time. We'll reconvene at 7 p.m. Good evening, everyone. I'm Mayor Linda Newing calling to order the Newcastle City Council regular meeting for Tuesday, November 7. The time is 7 p.m. This public meeting is being recorded and may be viewed later on the city's YouTube channel. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, City Clerk Westman, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Griffin.
Here.
Councilmember Villaseñor. Councilmember Lacotia.
Here.
Councilmember Charbonneau. Councilmember Clark. Deputy Mayor Sherlock. And Mayor Newing.
Here.
All here, Mayor.
Thank you. We do have a quorum tonight of 7. Everybody is in attendance. Is there any objection to approval of tonight's agenda as presented? If not, please show the final agenda approved as presented. Public comment. We have one person in our audience signed up. Carol Simpson, would you like to step up to the microphone? You have 3 minutes to speak. Please state your name and the neighborhood in which you reside. Welcome.
I can use my new glasses. Good evening, Madam Mayor, Chair. It is unfortunate again that I must appear here to rebut the blatant lies promoted by 2 of your fellow council members when they pretend to be concerned citizens not speaking for council in emailed newsletters dispensing disinformation to Newcastle residents. They seem to think their job is just 2 days a month, 6 to 8 p.m., and that's about how much effort and respect they give their position as council members. They seem to prefer community activism. If they were to call the city staff or read their code or check their comprehensive plan, they would find that the 136th Street adjacent to the Lee development does not require full street improvements. The council vote was correct to not impose requirements beyond those contained in the Newcastle Municipal Code. Had that vote happened, the litigation would surely have been inevitable. Washington State has vested rights doctrine that protects property owners from imposition of new surprise regulations. Vesting upon permit application provides developers and landowners certainty and predictability in the land use regulations applicable to their projects. The Lee development traffic study numbers showed that the level of service, as determined by the Newcastle Comprehensive Plan, would not be compromised and no mitigation improvements to the surrounding streets would be required. The 2 council members out of line in leading the public to believe that the council can hold development accountable by arbitrarily adding requirements not contained in the municipal code. If you really want to improve Newcastle, dig into the comprehensive plan. And when the update is presented to you next year, that is our big opportunity to guide new development. If you really want to improve Newcastle, finish the update that was started 10 years ago to the 23-year-old public works standards and add traffic calming measures. If you really want to improve Newcastle, put the city money where your mouths are and hire the necessary consultants to get this work done. We're tired of waiting.
Thank you, and I apologize. Okay, I'll catch you next time. Apologize. Okay, any other additional comment? That's all I have signed up. Anybody else in the audience? We don't have anybody virtually. I'll close that public comment period. All right, we have no ceremonial presentations tonight. Council comment. Councilmember Clark, do you want to start us off?
Thank you, Mayor. Saturday is Veterans Day. You all should know that already. So we have our service here at 8 o'clock at the flagpole. Please come on out and participate. I put a post up on Facebook Newcastle neighborhood. So in that post, there's a link, several links to other activities in the area on Saturday. So please take a look. There's there's the Auburn Veterans Day Parade. If you've never had a chance to go, it's pretty impressive. And the Museum of Flight is putting on a really good service for a couple of hours as well. And there's a few others in there. So come on out, 8 a.m. resident said, man, that's an ungodly hour. And I said, yeah, I'm really sorry about that, but I'm busy the rest of the day with other Veterans Day commitments. So I wanted to make sure Newcastle has our own service. So that's why it's so early. So please, despite the ungodly hour, please join us. Thank you.
Councilmember Charbonneau.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to read a brief prepared statement on October 30th. This is the first time we've gathered since the shooting that occurred in our community. So I just want to say I'm saddened by the loss of life that occurred outside the Newcastle Library last week. For me personally, the passing of a man who, like me, was 26 years old and had his whole life ahead of him is just objectively, I think, very devastating. And I wanted to commend our officers. I'm glad some are in the audience tonight. For responding promptly and thoroughly. And I really sincerely hope that our community response to tragedies like this can be to come together and be constructive rather than pull apart and point fingers. There's no program or policy that we can concoct that can completely prevent tragic incidents such as this. And I'm really proud the city of Newcastle has continually been labeled one of the safest cities in the state by SafeWise's independent rankings year over year. We don't intend to take incidents like this for granted, at least I don't. I'm proud that earlier this year, thanks to the efforts of Police Chief Steve Kazuhiro, we took a step further to addressing domestic violence by partnering with Project Be Free to provide a larger range of domestic violence advocacy for mental health professionals in our community. And I take some time myself as well to serve as a voting member on the Domestic Violence Initiative Regional Task Force as a member from Newcastle. And then the end of my prepared statement, I just wanted to say as well, I was able to meet with Mercer Island Council member Ted Weinberg last week, and they were very excited about our partnership with holding Mercer Island Municipal Court here and using council chambers. They said it was a true win-win for everyone involved, so that's really great. Newcastle residents don't have to go as far to contest a ticket. And then just lastly, happy Election Day. This is the first and only time I will wear a T-shirt to a council meeting. It says, I know it's hard to read, maybe for YouTube, it says vote for mental health, but please just vote. If you're at home, I would say make a beeline or sprint to the ballot box. You have it until 8 p.m. Thank you.
Councilmember Lakota.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just wanted to say that Saturday and Sunday is the festival of Diwali. It's the biggest festival in India, Festival of Lights. And I'm very thankful to Newcastle Library. As of now, as we speak, they're celebrating Diwali in the Newcastle Library. And there was a big celebration. I don't know if anybody got a chance to go to Bellevue Square Mall last Saturday. There was a huge festival happening, over there. So there might be a little fireworks on Saturday and Sunday, if that's okay, because we do a lot of fireworks during the festival of Diwali. So just wanted to wish everyone happy Diwali. It's festival where we pray to the goddess Lakshmi. She is goddess of wealth, basically wealth meaning wisdom and knowledge. So everybody happy Diwali. Thank you.
Councilmember Villasenor.
Thank you. This time of the year, we fall back. Everyone knows it's pretty dark out there about 4:30, and while black rainwear is ultimately fashionable, walking around in black rainwear with your hood up makes you essentially invisible. And I've already had to stop quickly for people who made an assumption that perhaps I see them, but I cannot. So it is my yearly plea to tell people to ask people to please spend a few dollars on a reflective vest if you're the type of person who likes to take late afternoon walks or evening walks. It's going to keep you safe. It's going to keep all the rest of us safe. So thank you so much, and enjoy those evening walks with your reflective vest.
Councilmember Griffin.
No comment.
Deputy Mayor Sherlock.
In keeping with the theme of celebrations, I just want to give a preemptive thank you to our community members who are actively planning the tree lighting ceremony at the Newcastle Fruit and Produce Stand, which happens the Saturday after Thanksgiving. And I'm just putting out ask if you're interested in helping. I'm sure that they could use more volunteers. So you can always email me and I can point you to the right person.
Okay, on our agenda tonight, we have a couple of presentations. I'd like to welcome Holly Sanabria. So I apologize, but no, it's okay. No, it's not okay. Sanabria, welcome.
You know, it couldn't be any more obvious. Formerly Coachy, I just got married exactly a month ago, and Scott dragged me over here to be here tonight. We could have celebrated our month, but no, I'm just joking. We better last a lot more than a month. So I am joining you all tonight to talk about the city's preparation for the 2024 state legislative session. And with that, we'll just jump right in. Do I have somebody who's got our slide decks ready to go? You're pointing the finger. Oh, we don't have to pull it up if you all have it on in your packet. Oh, it's totally fine. I can keep going. So you'll see in your packets the first slide, right, Scott? Okay. So I'll first begin with a recap of our accomplishments over the last legislative biennium, then provide a general overview of what to expect from the 2024 legislative session. We'll then review the city's legislative agenda, and then I'll wrap up about talking about next steps. So I began advocating for the city at the end of 2021, right before we headed into the 2022 legislative session. And since that time, the city has elevated its voice in Olympia, has strengthened relationships with the 41st legislative delegation, and has received significant investment at the state level for various community projects. I highlight the successes from the last biennium to remind you all that how we structure the city's legislative agenda, having a voice at the legislative level throughout the year and during session does matter. And it requires two major pieces that I want to remind you all of before we dive into the city's priorities for the upcoming session and beyond. And we can skip to the third slide, I believe. Go back one more, I'm so sorry. Okay, great. So one, remain focused. Because there are so many issues that come across legislators' desks, it's very important for the city to create a legislative agenda that is hyper-focused and list the top issues we'd like to see our state legislators tackle. We aim to align the priorities with the state's biennium, and midway through, where we are now, we make minor changes to the agenda to reflect what was accomplished in the first year and what we can turn our attention to for the next. And then two, planning ahead. Although we have come very closely to accomplishing just about everything on the city's agenda, it is unlikely everything we want to get done will happen in one session. Take the city's transportation project request, for example. We continue to put this at the forefront because it is a long-term goal and one that will require multiple years of advocacy work to increase the chances of May Creek Park Drive to be in the queue and to be prioritized when a budget package or additional funding is identified for local projects at the state level. So some great accomplishments over the last 3 legislative sessions, and some reminders as we head into the 2024 session and work towards other goals, both short and long term. So let's dive into what we're expecting for the 2024 session. Next slide, thank you. The 2024 session will be a short 60-day session, the second year of the biennium. So as a reminder, odd number years are long 105-day sessions, and even number years are short 60-day sessions. The legislature's primary objective during a short session is to adopt supplemental operating, capital, and transportation budgets. Supplemental budgets are designed to make small changes to the biennial budgets, or when the legislature has adopted the one in the previous year, they account for changes in revenue projections and program or project costs. The most recent operating budget forecast shows the state has roughly $900 million more than what was anticipated when the budget was adopted. Meanwhile, transportation projects around the state are continuing to come in higher than what they were estimated and received funding for in the current budgets. So legislators will need to determine how to manage those costs. WashDOT is estimating that projects are costing upwards of 30% more than what was appropriated. And the capital budget has roughly $95 million in remaining bonding capacity. Every bill that was introduced in the 2023 session that did not pass will will be automatically reintroduced, and legislators can introduce new bills as well. Democrats still hold a strong majority in both chambers, and every member of the House and half the Senate will be up for re-election in November 2024. In general, committee assignments and chairs will remain the same as last year. The one exception is that Senator Christine Rolfes, former chair of the Senate Ways and Means Committee, and lead operating budget writer in the Senate, has resigned from her position in the Senate to serve as the Kitsap County Commissioner. Her role as lead budget writer will be filled with Vice Chair Senator June Robinson. She's from Everett. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Now, diving into the city's draft legislative priorities, the first being transportation. As you will see in the draft agenda within your packets, we have included a statement that encompasses Newcastle's support to invest in infrastructure at the state and local level, highlighting maintenance and preservation needs, as well as projects that aim to provide alternative modes of transportation to reduce the number of cars on the road. A local project that speaks to the legislature's goal of reducing emissions and providing multimodal options is the city's May Creek Park project. The city continues to prioritize this project, and I would recommend continuing to do so. We certainly have made progress in this space and have raised awareness with the 41st legislative delegation. However, as I mentioned earlier, the state's transportation budget is struggling to meet maintenance and preservation needs on current roadways, while also facing an increase in project costs for projects that have already been planned for years. So since it's not a budget year and we know the transportation budget is already in a deficit, it is unlikely we will secure any transportation funds this year. But this is a need, and if we don't ask, we definitely won't receive anything. It also demonstrates that we remain consistent and continue to have the same need and the same goal in improving pedestrian access in Newcastle. The next item is one we remain to stay in the loop on. The major I-405 projects have fallen into that bucket that I had mentioned previously of projects with a funding shortfall. The statement on the draft agenda highlights the city's support in keeping this at the forefront by addressing that funding gap and ensuring the projects along the corridor will stay on schedule. Last month, the State Transportation Commission met to discuss toll recommendations for the corridor, and during that discussion, it was shared that WashDOT is still assessing the total number, but it does appear there is a $275 million funding gap for the planned corridor projects. So a huge, huge hurdle the legislature will have to face. The next two items are public safety, and I'll just combine behavioral health, which we included in last year's agenda as well, two things that we're pulling over. For public safety, there's also a need and a collective push to advocate for further investment to offset the costs associated with the Blake decision and the law they passed last year to address that. The legislature is likely to continue the ongoing discussion on public safety with a likely focus on law enforcement officer recruitment and retention. And then the Association of Washington Cities includes both of these on their legislative agenda as well. So we will be joined by others. I'll also note AWC will be pursuing an update to the existing local option public safety tax to allow implementation by councilmanic authority and providing flexibility for revenue to be used to cover increase of officers or related programs like behavioral health co-responder teams. Cities can currently implement this tax, sales tax up to 0.1% approval from a majority of the voters. So this proposal would change that law to allow council to impose the tax and up to 0.3% rather than the limited 1/10. So I'm happy to provide further information on this proposal if it's of interest to council. And in regard to behavioral health, it has been said that the biggest fiscal challenge facing lawmakers is the state's behavioral health system, which is under increased scrutiny from the True Blood settlement. The state is also facing a lawsuit from several counties for not providing services for civil conversion patients, so including a statement in support of enhanced professional mental health and other social services within the agenda. And then lastly is affordable housing. Although 2023 is described as the year of housing, there will be a push for a dedicated revenue source for affordable housing. We have joined AWC and other communities supporting the expansion of REIT authority, real estate excise tax, for state and locals to fund affordable housing. This was a bill that was introduced last session and will once again be considered and pushed by many local governments. The conversations around transit-oriented development have continued throughout the interim, and I continue to remain involved in those discussions with legislators and other stakeholders. There seems to be more of an understanding of what tools communities really need to make transit-oriented development effective on the ground. And that comes with the realizations that it takes more than just zoning to make development occur. Infrastructure investments are needed to spur development, and we don't want to displace individuals. We want to preserve natural, affordable housing already in place as well. So a lot of conversations going on, and this will continue to be plugged in, and it'll continue to be at the forefront. So, next slide. So as you can tell, even though it'll be a short session, 2024 is already shaping up really to be a busy one for the legislature. Following tonight's meeting, once the agenda is finalized and approved by you all, we'll meet with the city's legislators to review the priorities, which we already have lined up for next week, so that's great. We also have an appreciation event with the delegation next week to share our thanks for the park funding we have received and to demonstrate that those dollars are being put to good use here out in the community. The Senate has legislative committee days on November 30th and December 1st, and the House will meet on December 4th and 5th. This is where legislators are in Olympia for committee day meetings and receive briefings on like the major issues that will arise during the upcoming session. And then before you know it, the first day of the 2024 session is here starting on January 8th. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. And of course, you're always welcome to contact me at any point, and I appreciate your time tonight. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any questions? All right, we're looking forward to maybe a few more dollars next session from that state ledge.
Possibly.
I
We're going to keep planning and keep preparing, and we're coming up to a big budget year in 2025, so that'll be a good time as well.
Thank you, Holly.
Of course.
Okay. Moving on, our agenda got a little weird tonight, it looks like. My comments, not much. I do have the opportunity of hosting with the chamber tomorrow evening at Tapatio. An opportunity for me to thank this community that's been so supportive of my work on city council. Please know that this is not funded by the city. I want to make that very clear. That's very important to me, that this maybe to some might have an appearance of public money being used for it, and that is certainly not the case. I am paying out of pocket. That's about it. And Q3, Chief Kajihiro, I've lost you out there. There you are. You have a third quarter police crime statistics report, and you have members of your team with you tonight. Thank you.
Yes.
Welcome.
Okay, good evening. This is the third quarter stats. Some of it don't look good, so I'll give you a warning right now. Next slide. Okay, as this is every council meeting, this is compiled by our crime analysis unit and our sector program. And I made a mistake, it's supposed to say third quarter. Next slide. Okay, crimes are reported in three categories: crimes against person, crimes against property, and crimes against society. Next. Okay, here's the crimes against, I guess, the three different categories. Property, which was 311 last year, went up to 319, just like eight reports, I should say. Next is crimes against persons, went from 39 to 38, and society, crimes against society, 5. This year is 2. Next slide, please. Okay, this here is the assaults. Last year we had 21 reports. This year we got 15. Vehicle thefts includes thefts and attempts. Last year was 36. This year to third quarter is 61. 19 of that was Hyundai or Kia. I tried to do that myself and I came up with different numbers, so I went with the professionals and that's the official numbers there. Hyundai and Kia last year was 7. Burglaries went up by 1 from 37 to 38 this year. Next slide, please. Okay, this is a comparison with Bellevue PD. Their third quarter stats for vehicle theft went up from 460 to 559. Burglaries for them went down from 549 for 432. Just a comparison on the auto thefts that it's happening all around us. Next slide. Okay, I contacted Renton PD, so they gave me the year to date to October 26. That's the stats. They had 1,153 vehicle thefts. If you add in the attempts, it's 1,497. Our stats in King County, it's both. So as they said, a lot of those attempts and auto thefts were from Hyundai and Kias. Next slide, please. Okay, here is larcenies, shoplifting. Last year we had 1. Nobody reported it, really. This year we started doing shoplift emphasis. We conducted 3. And so year to date, we had 10 arrests. So 10 of the 13 was caused by our emphasis. Next one is theft of auto parts. Went from 41 down to 24. And theft, basically larcenies from theft from autos went from 61 down to 34 this year. Next slide. What happened to these cases? We've had 49 arrests on those cases and 46 last year, and the year before 34. Next slide. Okay, traffic citations and collisions. We had 867 citations last year. This year, it was 834 citations. That's kind of like, as a result, MPO Treadway said, I tasked him with a lot more other ancillary duties to complete. So it went down a little bit. Total collisions went down from 66 last year to this year was 46. And injury collisions went up by 2 from 15 to 17. Next slide, please. Okay, here's the dispatch calls for service. It went up just slightly from 1,427 to 1,443 this year. So just a slight increase. Okay, here is the Newcastle heat maps where all the dispatch calls for service would come in. If you see right there on the reds, that's where we get most of our dispatch calls for service. That would be right in the downtown core. A lot of it is the apartment complex or the businesses. Next slide. Okay, highlights. This is one of the things that was on my plan when I first took over, because I started doing this in Burien. I actually wrote a draft of the business crime watch or crime prevention handbook in Burien before I came here. I started doing it there. Never really completed it. Completed it here, and so we came up with this after we started seeing just an increase this summer with like Tapatios getting broken into, and is that Mod Pizza, Starbucks, and Blazing Onion and Frosty Barrel was getting broken into, and we felt that it was important to get this launched as soon as we could. So the ideas of this program, it was just to improve our communication between businesses and the police, educate them, on crime prevention through our handbook that we made and in-person meetings, and also offering the crime prevention through environmental design, which we already started doing throughout the city, which I'll get to that. And encourage the business and property managers to leverage technology for their security, and creating a network list for emergency contacts and information sharing. That's important because there's several times over graveyard shift that a business get breaking into, we have no way to contact them. We got no information or anything like that. And just to create community by networking and encouraging support for each other's business. And a lot of credit goes to that is for Detective Martin. That was one of his first projects once he came aboard. So next slide, please. Okay, here is another thing. Detective Martin, he pretty much hit the ground running. We came up with the idea of passing out the steering wheel locks to the people, because we advertised it on the city website, Facebook, and I guess the city newsletter. And nobody, well, I wouldn't say nobody, a handful of people came to pick up steering wheel locks. So we said, we're gonna go to the people. We're gonna go to the apartment complexes and try and identify the people with Hyundais and Kias and pass out the locks. So the first one is at Notch, is on November 14th. I think Detective Martin is in the talks with Castle Creek, right? Yeah, so he's in talks with Castle Creek, you know, we're gonna try and contact the other apartment complexes. Next slide. Okay, one of the things that we've been doing is adding extra patrols and graveyard shift. Just on selected days for high visibility patrols, because we identify certain days during the week where auto thefts are more likely to occur. So we've been trying to put an officer on those days, but I also vary the days when we can get officers out there. Next one is, we had a robbery at McDonald's. Suspect stole the cash register draw. Detective Bertner was able to develop probable cause and charge the suspect in the robbery. Next slide. Here's the shoplift emphasis. July 12th, we had 2 arrests for theft third, shoplifting. One of the males had a history of auto theft and a warrant out of Pierce County. So this was in partnership with Safeway, Bartell, and QFCs. September 21st, we did another one. We had 3 arrests for theft. One of the suspects was arrested for theft third and drug charges, but he also had 4 warrants for almost $15,000 in bail. And according to Safeway, this is the 13th time he was arrested at a store between Newcastle and Auburn. So we have a good relationship with Safeway and Bartell's, the loss prevention. And so we already scheduled the next one for the year. Next slide, please. Okay, here's the crime prevention through environmental design site surveys. So far since we launched it, I think it was last quarter, we had 1 residential reach out to us, the Notch Apartments, and shops at Newcastle Commons. We did surveys so far. Next slide. Project Be Free. Since we implemented, we had 2 referrals and one assist with a DV protection order so far. Next slide. Okay, here's a good note and sad. We lost Detective Bertner to the King County Major Crimes Unit. In her place, we got Deputy Corey Martin. He's a detective now to replace Detective Bertner. And we also acquired Deputy Felix Candelario from Precinct 4, the White Center, Skyway area. That was effective of October 28th. With that said, I'm going to call up Detective Martin up here, and he can introduce himself, and then next will be Felix.
Hello again. Corey Martin, new detective here for Newcastle. I did come to Washington State as a lateral. I worked about 14 years in the state of Florida before coming here for the Gainesville Police Department, University of Florida area. I came to Washington State. I first worked for 2 years at Tukwila before coming to the sheriff's office. So that's a little bit of my history. In that time, I've worked detective work, prior persons in property crime, as well as narcotics and traffic homicide, traffic enforcement type stuff. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Okay, we got Deputy Felix Candelario. He is pretty fresh off of his probation, so I think he's very happy to be here.
Yes. Thank you, Felix Candelario. Originally came from Florida, been here since 2015. Did a lot of Newcastle overtime, and when the opportunity presented itself, I talked with Chief Cajero and got myself over here. Been here with the sheriff's office a little over a year, almost 2. I enjoy being on the overtime, so I'll be on the emphasis teams whenever possible, and hopefully working on some projects with the team here to be more involved with the community. So, thank you.
Okay, any questions?
Questions for Chief? No, you're good.
Okay.
Deputy Candelario, I told you we wouldn't embarrass you too bad, but thank you for being here. Detective Martin, thank you. You guys stay safe out there. All right. Okay, moving on. Council committees, any economic development? Councilmember Charbonneau.
Thank you. Yeah, if you want to start getting that ready, City Clerk. I will update you. We're meeting tomorrow. We're discussing the parcel evaluation that we did prior across from Lake Bourne, and we have ongoing discussions about the comp plan and the wayfinding signs. But we actually have a visual for you tonight, courtesy of Community Development Director Hoffman, and I believe folks will be able to see it on YouTube as well. I'll pause for you all to be wowed at. But more seriously, these are the signs we discussed. This is a design option that's being presented to us after we gave some feedback, placing at some key areas along Coal Creek, potentially Golf Course Road, to direct folks to where things are. And we would welcome any feedback at the meeting of these signs, but I wanted to actually have a visual for this instead of just talking about it for quite some time.
I have a question. So you have our website on the very last sign. Is there any way to add a QR? We have a pretty diverse community, and I'm just wondering if a QR code could be added?
After tomorrow, one of the next steps is to actually design the sign and the actual wording in text, and so that comment is appreciated. This is just an example of the style. And so each sign and location that we look at will have its own wording. Prior feedback was website, and so we'll take that feedback per QR code also.
Gosh darn, Mayor's jumping the gun again. All right, Finance Committee.
We did have a Finance Committee meeting at the end of last month. Our next Finance Committee is going to be the first week of December. It'll be our last one of the year.
Okay, taking a little break there. I like it. Good for you guys. All right, no Salary and Benefits Committee. Any regional committee meetings? Nada. Okay. Planning Commission report. We don't have Chair Gatzik here, do we? I don't think we have those reports this time, right? Yeah.
He plans on giving it in the second meeting of each month.
Yeah, that's right.
And then
Okay.
he's been a little ill recently and very busy.
I understand that. City Manager Pingle, what do you have for us in your report?
I did want to point out a closure that we were very late in getting word on. Apparently WashDOT was as well. It's an issue that WashDOT's been having with their contractor on the I-405 projects. But we were informed just very recently that There's I-405 closures from Coal Creek to SR 900 last night, tonight, and tomorrow night from 11 to 5. And so we got information posted earlier today, but wanted to make that known to the council, and Director Bronze made it known to WashDOT that we found out by their press release that's not good. They were apologetic and noticed and told us that they'd be following up with their contractor to make sure that that doesn't happen any longer, but wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. Also, I appreciate Councilmember Charbonneau mentioning the shooting. I also just wanted to express the sadness. Everybody I talked to that day that was around or that was at the shops or the shop owners kind of commented about, they were apologetic and sensitive to that issue. I also just wanted to thank the responders for the work that they do. They did do an incredible job in getting it cleaned up fairly quickly. If you go walk over there, they did a fantastic job scraping the scene. You can't tell that anything happened there. And so just want to thank them for that, and King County Major Crimes. I also just wanted to, if those situations affect you or hearing about them or driving by or whatever affects you, please take the time to talk to somebody. Don't carry that if you don't have to. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Councilmember Clark.
City Manager, just maybe Director Bronze, but the closure on Golf Course Road, right, it's been proven to be very disruptive to the region, right? Is there any talk about speeding that up somehow or working extra shifts to get that done? Because it's a long time.
You're talking about for the Coal Creek culvert?
The bridge closure, to create a bridge out of a culvert, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if Director Bronze has any additional information.
No, I've not heard anything. I think they're working at an expedited pace at the current time, but they're not going to do like overnight shifts or anything.
Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. Is there any objection to approval of tonight's unanimous consent agenda? If not, please show the consent agenda approved as presented. We have a couple of public hearings tonight, folks. City Clerk Westman, are there any audience members signed up for public hearing number 1 or number 2? I will take it, please. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, the next item on our agenda is a public hearing on the 2024 revenue sources. We will open the public hearing, receive a staff presentation, followed by council member questions. Then the floor will be open for public testimony. If there is anyone in the audience who wishes to testify during the hearing, please add your name to the sign-up list over on the credenza if you haven't done so already. We will call your name when it's your turn to speak. After testimony, there will be an opportunity for council member comments, after which we will close the public hearing and proceed to motions. Are there any questions about the order of the public hearing? Okay, the time is 7:44, and the public hearing on 2024 revenue sources is now open. All right. So do we have a public hearing? Oh, Director Chambers, of course. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, Council. Tonight's first public hearing is for revenue sources. This is required by state law before we can adopt the budget, that we must have a public hearing for revenue sources, and more specifically, property tax in advance of adopting an ordinance for the property tax levy. Currently, the ordinance that is in front of you, it's 2023-657. It includes the 1% allowable levy, new construction and re-levy for refunds. The total is $6,299,988. This is an increase of $122,177,000 over last year's levy, and that's again including the new construction and the re-levy for refunds. The levy rate as calculated would be 1.20856. This is a bit of an increase from last year's rate of 1.04146. One thing I would like to bring to your attention is on the second page of the agenda bill, I attempted to show the calculations for how we come up with the levy base, the assessed valuation that comes from King County, and the levy rate calculation in an attempt to make it easier to understand for everybody. So the top section talks about the assessed valuation, which again, we are given from the King County's assessor's office. The information included here is current as of October 26th. We may still receive different versions of it before they finalize it at the end of the year. But as of right now, our estimated valuation is $5,212,782,164. This is a decrease of, we'll call it $726 million from last year's valuation. So a sizable drop from last year's assessed valuation. But including the levy base from last year, so this is exclusive of any re-levy for refunds that were added in last year, which was 11,705, I believe. So that base was $166,955,000. So the 1% would be just simply 1% off of that number. So that's 61,670 once you round it. And then the new construction total as of October 26th was 57,658. And off to the side, you can see that that is the new assessed value from the new construction at the rate for last year. Well, for this year, the last adopted rate. And then the re-levy for this year is 13,705. So that's what brings us to the 6,299,988. And then when we go down to calculate the levy rate, we then take that base, divide it by the assessed value from King County, and then when we multiply it by 1,000, that gives us the levy rate per $1,000 of assessed value. So that is what I wanted to present. I would love to answer any questions if you have any at this time.
Thank you. Any questions for Director Chambers? Wow, you're getting off real easy tonight over there. Okay, seeing no questions, I will go ahead and open it up for public testimony. I don't have anybody signed up. This is for the next public hearing. Are there any members of the audience wishing to speak? All right, seeing none, I'll close the public testimony. Council member comments, motions? Actually, I'll close I won't take motions yet until I close the comments. Okay, so we will close the public hearing. The time is 7:48. I will now take motions on the 2024 revenue sources. Councilmember Charbonneau.
I move adoption of ordinance 2023-657, setting the ad valorem tax levy for the 2024 fiscal year as presented.
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Charbonneau, seconded by Councilmember Villasenor, to adopt ordinance 2023-657, setting the ad valorem tax levy for the 2024 fiscal year as presented. Councilmember Charbonneau, would you like to speak to your motion, please?
Yeah, I'll try to be brief. I think, so the great news is that the assessor did lower the valuation, so that's going to hit individuals less hard than it might have last year. I think looking at all of these, the context is really critical. Again, any individual Newcastle resident is going to pay 11.5 to 12% only of their taxes are going to be from the city. I think the context as well as factors out of our control. There are many increasing police costs, even if we didn't move to add a police officer like we did, increasing fire cost, cost of living increases. We are projected down another 600,000 in development revenue. So I know it's not a fun thing to look at taking the 1% tax levy, but keeping in mind all the factors and that for the average household, that would be, I believe the city manager told me, about $26 as a cost to them. And keeping in mind as well that I was fortunate enough to attend, we were talking about in a public issues committee that other cities are, the legislature is considering even removing the 3% max that cities can take on tax levy. We're taking a lot less relative to a lot of other cities and what a lot of other cities want to do. We're tied for last in the county with the amount of the number of taxes we levy on our citizens. So I think context is critical, and that's the context and my decision-making ethos on this.
Councilmember Villasenor, anything to add?
Just to keep in mind that because of the sharp decrease in assessed values for our single-family homes, the average single-family home owner is going to pay less, even with the 1% increase from this year. So it's just something to keep in mind.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, motion on the floor to adopt ordinance 2023-657, setting the ad valorem tax levy for the 2024 fiscal year as presented. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Motion carries 4-3 with council members Clark, Lakota, and Griffin dissenting. All right, moving on. We have one more public hearing tonight. And this public hearing is on the preliminary 2024 budget. This is our public hearing number 2 on this matter. We will open the public hearing, receive a staff presentation, followed by council member questions. Then the floor will be open to the public for testimony. If there is anyone in the audience who wishes to sign up to testify at this public hearing, I do have the sign-in sheet, but you can certainly sign up on the one from the last public hearing, and we will combine them. When it's your turn, I will call your name. And after testimony, there'll be an opportunity for council member comments, after which we will close the public hearing and proceed to motions. Are there any questions about this public hearing process? All right, seeing none. It is 7:52, and I will open the public hearing. Presentation, Director Chambers? Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So again, this is a public hearing for the preliminary budget. This is the second on the budget itself in general, and is required by law for us to hold to get public comment on the preliminary budget. The current, obviously this document was prepared before the conversation we had at tonight's study session. So these numbers were from the initial preliminary budget with the changes that were made after the study sessions in October. So excluding the change made tonight, we have a beginning fund balance total of $19,551,558 estimated. Revenues of $25,752,554. Expenditures of $28,520,818, and then ending fund balance would be $16,783,294. So when you are looking at the budget itself, and this I think is a little bit different than it's been presented in the past, but when we look at both sides, we consider beginning fund balance and revenue total, which is $45,304,112. And then our expenditures and ending fund balance must be the same to consider it balanced in the eyes of the state auditor's office. So both sides, if you add them up, equal to the $45,304,112. So that's what we would consider our total budget amount. The rest of the agenda bill just describes the information that was in City Manager Pingle's list of changes from the study sessions we had in October. So with that, I'll open it up for any other comments.
Thank you. Any questions for Director Chambers? Okay, seeing none, I will go to public testimony. I have one person signed up, Carol Simpson. Please come to the podium, state your name and neighborhood in which you reside, and you will have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Carol Simpson from the Vineyards. I wanted to talk about public safety, and thank you for your vote to increase the police officer staffing to the 12th man. I know they're not all guys, but I just couldn't resist that Seahawk referral. We're getting our 12th guy. Public safety, though, is not just policing. Public safety is also our safe streets. Are they well lit? Do they have safe crossings? Is traffic moving too quickly? Is there speeding or racing in our neighborhoods? I've seen that in my neighborhood. Do you coordinate with the schools on their walk routes to schools? Do the kids have a safe route to school? Are we adopting safe street standards to assure adequately protected sidewalks, crossings, and traffic calming? Public safety, as I mentioned, applies to schools, but it applies to the physical plant. We are lucky to have safe schools. Our 3 schools are all newly built under building codes that help assure fire protection, safe exiting, and earthquake-safe structures. Our children, those from out of Newcastle, are very safe in our public schools. We have school districts dedicated to safe schools. I am very pleased that we have a community where our couple of thousand students, many of them coming from outside Newcastle, are in safe school buildings. We have safe buildings because our cities hire expert consultants, many of them certified, so forth, for plan checking, the architectural and structural drawings, and inspecting construction. They make sure buildings follow current codes that require structural integrity to withstand earthquake and prevent fire or fire spread, provide safe exiting. If we have certified inspectors to watch construction, contractors don't always are on the up and up, make sure the slump on the concrete is great so our buildings don't fail. So they have to make sure materials used meet the specification requirements and all installed for the plans and specs. That creates a safe community. We have a safe community because we have an excellent fire department and emergency responders who are highly rated and take pride in their exceptional service. I double-checked Bellevue's website for the fire department. And they're backed up by Renton and Mercer Island and nearby cities. They're a team. City communication is essential to public safety. What happens in an emergency? How are we informed? Our police like that we call them, that we help them in giving them tips. That's a two-way communication. They partner with us residents in public safety. And it cannot be a strong partnership without good communication. But the police blotter, we haven't seen that since 2021. And the communications have been relegated to a consultant who is not in Newcastle on a daily basis. They're a consultant. They work elsewhere, they're a contract worker. That reduces the effectiveness of our city communications. Please prioritize better communication. So I support the 2024 budget for the increased police, for quality services, for all the consultants, the quality consultants you hire to provide us public safety. And the proof will be in the pudding, whether you vote for that budget. Please do.
Thank you. Any other members of the audience wishing to speak in regards to the public hearing on the 2024 preliminary budget? Okay, I will close the testimony. Council, any comments? Okay, I will close the public hearing. This does not require a motion. That is item 12.2. 12.2? Yes, 12.2. On our agenda tonight. So it's coming up for action. Go ahead, Councilmember.
Quick question. Should we wait for the next version of this budget, considering the amendment that was made, or can we vote on it as amended?
So we should have Director Chambers walk through 12.2. The council can adopt as amended. Since the amendment was simple, it was one number, a couple of places, but the same number. If the council should desire, you can adopt the budget as amended.
And just so you know, I spoke with the city manager prior to this meeting, and what we kind of landed on is there's no rush to get that ordinance adjusted with the numbers tonight to reflect the hiring of an officer. We want to make sure it's right. So I'll come up here later in the week and get it signed. Okay. All right, moving on, closing the 11, no unfinished business. 12.1, approval of ordinance, what did I do? Oh, I knew that. You guys. Games you can play with your mayor and jokes you can play on your mayor. Oh. All right, let's move on to 12.2. Approval of ordinance 2023-658, adoption of the 2024 budget. Director Chambers, it's your show.
Okay, let's see if I can go 3 for 3 tonight. Before you is a agenda bill and proposed ordinance 2023-658 for the 2024 budget. We have done, according to the calendar, which is listed in here, a number of study sessions, public hearings, lots of discussion regarding tonight's budget, or excuse me, next year's budget, to have it up for adoption tonight. So looking at the change that was made earlier this evening during the budget study session, the difference would be within the fiscal impact. Beginning fund balance would remain the same. Revenue total would be increased by that transfer from the cumulative reserve to the general fund for the cost of the officer. So the new revenue total would be $26,007,221. The expenditure total would increase double that because we would have both the expenditure in general fund for the officer and then the transfer from cumulative reserve. So that would be an increase of $509,334, and expenditure total would become $29,030,152. And then our ending fund balance would be reduced because of the transfer out of cumulative reserve. And so that would be, the new total would be $16,528,627. So if you wanted to adopt as amended, and I can stop reading numbers out loud tonight, that would be your budget for 2024.
Thank you, Director Chambers. Any questions for Director Chambers? Any comments, any motions? I'll take them all. Councilmember Villasenor.
I move to adopt ordinance 2023-658 as amended, adopting the City of Newcastle 2024 budget in its final form and content for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2024.
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Villasenor, seconded by Deputy Mayor Sherlock, to adopt ordinance 2023-658 as amended, adopting the City of Newcastle 2024 budget in its final form and content for the fiscal year ending December 31, 2024. Councilmember Villasenor, would you like to speak to your motion?
I will. Thank you. Thank you to City Manager Pingle and Finance Director Chambers for their work on this. I think it was. I think it's a very successful process. I did want to touch on a point, a term that Councilmember Lacotia said. She said, "Use it or lose it." And while that's a very common corporate stance, it is not what we're required to do from a city government standpoint. Our staff has been excellent at guiding our budget in every year to make sure that we are only spending on absolutely the things that we need to. They're very much on top of their projects. I've always been impressed with their ability to do that and underspend the budget. So I'm very comfortable with this. I'm very happy with what I see here. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Sherlock, anything to add?
Yeah, I'm going to use my phrase that I always use this time of year. A budget is a plan, not a promise. And I think this is a really good plan. And I have a lot of faith in our staff to come in under budget like they do every other year.
Anyone else? I have a comment. It gives me great pleasure to support this as my final budget. Okay. On the floor, we have a motion to adopt ordinance 2023-658 as amended, adopting the City of Newcastle 2024 budget in its final form and content for the fiscal year ending December 31, 2024. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Motion carries 4-3 with council members Clark, Lakotia, and Griffin dissenting. All right, moving on. Sorry about the emotional thing. Wow. Hard night. Okay. Additional public comment. Do we have anyone signed up? City Clerk Westman. All right. Anyone out there want to make public comment? Okay, no more public comment. Planning calendar. City Manager Pingle, you're up.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of items of business for the November 21st City Council meeting. Fairly basic things, the city manager work plan, and then an additional opioid class action settlement that we've, similar to what we've had in the past. Both would be put on consent. I guess I would put it to the council, both of those items are not overly critical. It's Thanksgiving week. Is that a meeting that the council would like to forego? Just throwing it out there.
I'm willing to, is there a motion to cancel the meeting? Deputy Mayor Sherlock, go ahead.
I'll make a motion to cancel the November 21st council meeting.
Okay, it's been moved by Deputy Mayor Sherlock, seconded by Councilmember Villasenor to cancel the November 21, 2023 council meeting. Deputy Mayor Sherlock, would you like to speak to your motion?
Just taking the advice of our city manager, it seems like if we can put those off and it doesn't hurt anything, it sounds like a good idea to me.
Councilmember Villasenor, anything to add?
A lot of people do make travel plans during that week, so it seems to make sense to, since we have a light agenda, to move it into December.
Okay. Motion on the floor made by Deputy Mayor Sherlock, seconded by Councilmember Villasenor to cancel the November 21, 2023 council meeting. All in favor, please say aye. 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 Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Happy holidays. Okay. Anything else on planning calendar? All right, with that, and a past 24 budget, I will adjourn the meeting.